Chevre, hello. How are you? I hope everyone is gesund, stark, und freilach, begashmis und beruchnis. I hope everyone is healthy, strong, and happy physically and spiritually. To say that this week has been a difficult week is an understatement. This week has been a week of mourning, one of the most challenging and painful weeks for Gans Klal Yisrael. So first I would like to mention one point. Many people are commenting whether, we should dwell on the tragedy or make comments and speak. And it is difficult to speak. And we all know, Vayidem Aaron, Aaron was silent. But I think we have to remember when it says Vayidem Aaron, that's about the person who lived through the tragedy, and he's silent, he accepts Hashem's judgments and Hashem's act. But others are allowed to speak about the victims, about the families, and to proclaim Yisrael Asher Becho Espoir, and how the Eibishter says Maise Yodi L'espoir, and Am Yisrael Chai. How a year is amazing. This week, what we saw in Eretz Yisrael, demonstrations of Amunah and of Achdus and the outpouring of love and unity, was something wondrous to behold. We have to pray that we never have to come through a tragedy to come to display such feelings. But this is what we saw, and this is what is meant to inspire us. As we say, V'achayit liboy, the Rebbe, when the Rebbetzin was nostalgic, on that very same day, he mentioned V'achayit liboy, that we have to take a lesson. And we all know, Yeder Zach, was a Yid Zeta the Hert. Everything that you see here is meant to be a lesson, Avodas Hashem. So obviously, we're meant to take a lesson and to speak about the lesson and see how we improve. So I want to start with a prayer first of all. Bila hamoves lanetzach. Hashem should eliminate moves. Umocha Hashem alikim dima me'al kol ponim. And Hashem should erase the tears from all our faces. When we speak about Lag Baimer, there are two things, I think, which we have to focus on. One is the idea that Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai was the one who revealed Pnimiyas HaTorah. And Pnimiyas HaTorah is the inner dimension. And it teaches us, in every situation, not to look at things as they are externally, but the inside story. So that's one aspect that has to be stressed. We are not seeing the full picture. That's the first thing Reb Shimon bar Yochai taught us. That's the whole idea of Sosim Deiraisa. There's the hidden part of Torah. There's the Rozei Torah, the secrets of the Torah. There's the part of Torah that's called Soid. So, the mysterious, the ineffable, that which is beyond, the Neflois. So that's point A, and the lesson we have to take is to study more of Pnimiyas HaTorah to give us deeper insights in life and how to cope in general. And the second thing is, as we all know, the famous Torah, that when the world, the Gemara says, when the world needed rain, they came to Reb Shimon bar Yochai, and he said the Torah on the pasuk, Hine matoivu manoyim, sheves achim gam yochad. That is what Reb Shimon bar Yochai stands for. Has there ever been a time where there was a greater demonstration of Hine matoivu manoyim, sheves achim gam yochad than this past week? Again, chas v'sholem, we should have to come to this through a tragedy. But the lesson we have to take is to improve in this area, to stand for it, talk about it. Speak of this value and virtue of Hine matoivu manoyim Sheves Achim Gam Yochad. So, we're going to speak a thought for the week. And this thought of the week is, as we mentioned before, that we're going to speak about speech, hopefully this year, and how important it is and how careful you have to be about it. And we spoke already a couple of weeks about it. So in this week's Parsha is Behar Bechukosai. We'll speak something that's connected to both Parshas. So in this week's Parsha is the Pasuk where it says, V'loi soinu ishes hamisei. Translated over here, do not harass one another. And it means do not aggrieve. There's a noyes momin and there's a noyes dvorim. Rashi says, Kan hizir, here the Torah enjoins us, alei noas dvorim, regarding verbal harassment. Shaloi yaknit es chaveroi, one should not annoy his fellow. V'lo yasieno eitza she'eino higenes loi, nor give him advice that is not appropriate for him, lefi darkoi v'hanaosoi shel yoyatz, which means don't give him advice which is befitting for you, the one who's giving the advice, but you should think about the other person. So here we learn out the idea that you should not aggrieve another person. You're not allowed to hurt another person emotionally. You shouldn't wrong the other by words. You shouldn't offend him. You shouldn't hurt him emotionally. You shouldn't hurt his feelings. And nowadays, but first, by the way, in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, he brings down the Maimer Hazal, that G'doila Anois Dvarim, that the idea of causing someone pain and hurting him with words is worse than a nois mamain, than deceiving him in money matters. When it comes to money, it can be returned. But no amends can be made for pain inflicted with hurtful words. This is just a financial loss, but this is personal. So a person could be pained and hurt, and the wound is deep, and the scar could be forever. That's the Maimer Hazal. So in these days, in particular, I think we have a slight dilemma, if you'll forgive me. But first, let's go back to the way, the custom of Chassidim. For hundreds of years, there was something called the Chassidische Farbrengen. They had a Farbrengen, they said L'chaim, and sometimes one spoke to the other person, pretty direct, pretty straightforward. As there's a famous chassid, I'm not going to say his name, it's not important, he would speak pretty harshly. But obviously it came out of love, and obviously no one was offended. But when they asked him, why do you have to speak like that, so direct? And it was a bit salty too. And there was more than one chassid, by the way, that had this sort of custom. But the saying that I'm going to tell you now was said in particular concerning one chassid. They asked him, how come you speak so sharp? So they say two neschoyes of what he answered. Two versions. One answer he said was, we have to speak clearly, which means you got to be direct, clear. That's one answer he said. And the other answer he said was, we have to speak such language that the animal soul understands it. Like your Yetzer Hara, your evil inclination has to get it. It has to hit hard to the evil inclination. So that's the way it always was. And it was never a problem because there was such brotherly love. Everyone was so suffused and saturated with the love that no one even suspected it was coming from a bad place. That's how it always was. Now, today, there's such a thing in the world. It's called trigger warnings, safe space, I'm offended. And it's a big problem. And what do? You know, a lot of these sort of things are not real. You know, and it's a contradiction to being able to tell somebody something because that person might get offended. You know? So it's not so simple. So what do? So First of all, I think that we have to remember what we see from this Anoah's Dvarim is, you know the famous words they say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never harm me. No, Torah doesn't look like that at all. Not only sticks and stones may break your bones, but that might be only temporary because your bones will heal. But words can cut you so deep and hurt you so powerfully that it will remain forever. So that's already a whole different perspective, how careful we have to be with our words. So I think, just on a simple level, and I'm talking to myself over here too, you know what? First of all, always err on the side of caution. If you have a question or not, whether you're going to offend somebody or hurt somebody, obviously better just don't say it. But the truth is, like I said before, it's not always so easy to know. Of course, we're not talking about in a case that you intentionally do that. We're not even discussing that. Okay? But I'm not your rabbi. You should learn the halachas of Anoah's Dvarim to know exactly what to do. But I think I want to just put forth, if I may suggest humbly, one sort of guideline. And this guideline is, think. Whenever you're encountering a person and you're going to speak to that person, are you going to say words that are going to empower the other person? Lift him up? Pick up his morale? Encourage him? Make him feel like $1 million? Or are you going to make him feel deflated, depleted, etc.? And this, I think, is a more easier way to be able to make a resolution in this area about Anoah's Dvarim. In general, start the practice of affirmation, validation. Every person you encounter, try to speak words that will lift them up. Give them encouragement, empowerment. And in a way, similar to what the Alter Rebbe says about good character traits, in Hilchas Maso Matan he says, "V'keitzi yargel odam atzmei b'midas tovis achi kovuboy." How will a person accustom himself to cultivate good character traits until they are rooted in his personality? So the Alter Rebbe says, "Yaseh v'yishne v'yishalish b'maisim she'oisa al pi hamidas ha'elu." He should repeat his actions once, twice, 3 times in conformity to these character traits. V'yachzer b'hem tomid ad she'tiyah asiyosan kala be'einov v'yikovu hamidas b'nafshei. You should do this continually until such acts are easy for him and these traits become rooted within his soul. So here you are, my friends. Whoever you are, start practicing praising the other person. Start practicing picking up the other person. Start practicing words of empowerment and encouragement. And be very, very super careful not to belittle, not to discourage, not to dismiss, not to discredit. It's not so easy. You know, so many times we hear about somebody and they'll say he's special, he's good, he's amazing. And you say, no. You know, in a way, it's kommt an gering mevatl sein. Sometimes it just comes too easy to belittle, to knock. We have to start practicing the opposite, especially in a one-on-one personal relationship. That's it. Make the other person feel good. Drill it into your head. I am on a mission. And my mission is to just spread empowerment, encouragement, affirmation, validation. So I'm going to finish with 2 stories. One of them I'm not going to say accurately 100%. I'm just going to paraphrase it. It's a famous story. And that is about, there was a mother who was waiting in front of 770 on a hot summer day for her husband to come out after the Fabrengen, Shabbos afternoon. And she was standing there, and the Rebbe came out of 770, And her young boy, who she was holding his hand, just ran to the Rebbe, not knowing that it was the Rebbe, but the child just ran towards the Rebbe. The Rebbe was leaving 770. And the Rebbe, and this child was hot, and it was a hot, sweaty day. He took the Rebbe's kapota, and he wiped his face from the sweat. And he stuck out his hand, like children, they stick out the hand. And the Rebbe held the child's hand. They began walking. After a couple of steps, the kid looked up, and he saw it's not the Rebbe. So he jumped back, and he went away. Meanwhile, the mother was horrified. Oy vey! Her son wiped his face with the Rebbe's kapota, and that whole the way he acted was not showing reverence to the Rebbe. Just sticking out your hand and touching the Rebbe. By Lubavitcher Chassidim, we don't shake hands with the Rebbe. Anyways, right after Shabbos, she wrote a letter, etc., to the Rebbe, begging for forgiveness. I'm so sorry. I hope you meichel me. Obviously, my child didn't realize, and etc. This was a dishonor. Anyways, the Rebbe answered, "Thank you. There's nothing to be asked for forgiveness. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to express paternal feelings towards a child." Because the Rebbe had no children, physical children. And the Rebbe said, "Halavai, if only more people would give me the opportunity to be able to express my paternal side, my fatherly feelings and instincts. And when your son ran over to me and stuck out his hand, he was able to bring out that sense of feeling of being a father to a child. So thank you." So this is a typical story. There are hundreds of stories like that, which I love all these stories, how the Rebbe takes a situation. This mother was horrified and feeling down that she made such a mistake, and a child made such a mistake, and it was so embarrassing. What does the Rebbe do? The Rebbe picks her up, turns it around completely, and says thank you, and picks her up and makes her feel like $1 million. You're special, that you gave me this opportunity that no one else gives me. That's one story. There's another famous story, and this is connected to Parshas Bechukosai. In Parshas Bechukosai, we have the mitzvah of talking about Erchin. The pasuk says, "Ish ki yafli neder be'erkecha nefashis la'Hashem." It's talking about the laws of how to appraise the value of a pledge. And the person says, "I'm going to give a pledge to the value of this person." That's what the pasuk is talking about. Excuse me, I'm sorry. So there's a very famous story about the famous Chassid Reb Hillel Paracha. He never saw the Alter Rebbe, and he wanted to see the Alter Rebbe and ask him a question. And he had a very big question. He himself was a super genius Goen in learning, in Nigla, and in Pnimius HaTorah. Anyways, he prepared a question. And his question was in Masechtas Erchin, the tractate which talks about appraisals. And he had a question in that Masechta, in the Gemara Erchin, and he knew where the Alter Rebbe was going to stay, in an apartment, and he hid under the bed, I think, preparing himself that he's going to spring out, so he'd be able to just ask the Alter Rebbe this question. He had to hide in such a way, because otherwise there's Gaboyim, there's secretaries, and you can't just get to the Alter Rebbe. Anyways, he hid under the bed, and the Alter Rebbe walked into the room, and the Alter Rebbe said, the Alter Rebbe walked into the room, and even before Reb Hillel had a chance to come out from his hiding place, the Alter Rebbe said in the Nigen HaYedua, "As a junger man not a kashen erchin, darf frie sich meiler sein." If a young man has a question about appraisals, he has to first estimate himself. As soon as Reb Hillel Paracha heard that, he chalished, he fainted. And by the time he was woken, the Alter Rebbe had left. So, this is a lesson to everything we're talking about. You know, if you have a doubt, This is what the story means in Avodah, the Rebbe said. If you have a doubt about another person's value, then you have to evaluate yourself. And once you'll evaluate yourself, you'll realize what a yid is, or you'll realize how you're not perfect. Either way, once you evaluate yourself, all questions about evaluation will fall away. You'll come to respect the other person. You'll come to act in a way that's always encouraging another person, building him up, picking him up, and making him feel like he's the most important person in the world. The Eibusher should help. We should begin acting in such a way. It's not so easy, but start today acting in such a way where your words are words that bring positivity and encouragement to all others. And I'm sure that such an Aveda will bring the Gula Mitzvah Shlema. Take it from a Yad Mamish. Posting from my home, Be'ez Hashem Yisborech, your man in Melbourne.